So what's your view of this uptick in the number of cases in Beijing, and is there a chance that it'll get out of hand again?
Well, I think the fact that it's happening in Beijing is one of the most interesting aspects of this, because if there's one place in China that had the strictest controls to prevent further outbreaks, it's Beijing. So what that tells you is the coronavirus is no easier to control in China than in many other parts of the world. That means they're going to continue to find it hard to restart their economy, as they've told the world they will. And this narrative that they've triumphed over the virus looks very shaky indeed.
Yeah, I mean, did you see it as a triumph, what they were able to do, Michael?
No, because I think we have to remember how this all started. This started with failure and repression. The fact that the world is facing a pandemic is owing, at least in part, to the Chinese Communist Party's repression of knowledge about the disease and the outbreak, and the world lost time to work with China to contain it in Wuhan. So it's a story of failure, but now it's quite clear that Beijing is no more adept at managing this virus than many other parts of the world.
It's a bit of a separate matter, but it still relates to China. Increasing tensions at the border with India. What's your view on that? What is the story when it comes to that?
Well, I think this is linked to the pandemic, because what's happened with the Chinese government is they fear domestic weakness in the party's support from the people because of the pandemic. And they also are aware that the pandemic has deeply damaged their credibility internationally. Now, when the Chinese Communist Party feels weakened and threatened, traditionally it strikes out, it gets confrontational. And we're seeing that in the South China Sea. And unfortunately, we're seeing it between two nuclear-armed powers in the Himalayas.
So is it just creating a distraction here?
I think it's trying to convey strength. And I think some commentators have played into that by saying Beijing is taking advantage of the pandemic as an opportunity. Well, I think Beijing sees it more as a real weakness and a source of anxiety. And this aggression is to cover that.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, they're two nuclear powers. Where does this end up?
Well, I suppose the good news is we have two nuclear-age powers fighting each other in the Himalayas with Stone Age weapons. You know, rocks, clubs with wire wrapped around them, arm wrestling and fighting hand-to-hand in the night and tossing each other into a very cold river. So in a funny way, while it's the worst violence between these states for decades with the most casualties, using Stone Age weapons when you've got nuclear weapons shows some kind of strange restraint.
Yeah. It sure does. Michael, just finally, John Bolton has got a controversial book that's come out relating to Donald Trump. I guess all books relating to Donald Trump are controversial in some way. There is so much that's been talked about it already so far, but some of it, or most of it actually, leads to his relationship with Xi Jinping. The word is, from John Bolton's point of view anyway, that he needed Xi Jinping to help him get re-elected. What's your view on that, bearing in mind that John Bolton's probably got an axe to grind here?
Well, John Bolton has a history in national security of seeing military action as an answer for many problems. We've got to take that into account. But I think at the heart of this, we don't learn much new. We learn that Donald Trump prioritises the economy, the US economy. Now, whether he does that for personal electoral purposes or because he really believes that economic strength is the sole criterion for things, that's what this tells us. But I think the more interesting thing for all of us is this same arm wrestle between security and economics. And I think we've all started to realise you can't have a prosperous economy if you don't have security. And I think that's the tension in the Bolton book.
What about, there's a lot of points that have been made this morning from those people who have read it. One in particular says that despite America's disputes with China, apparently Donald Trump asked Xi Jinping to boost the purchases of soybeans and wheat and that is in order to help him get re-elected. And he also seems to support China's position when it comes to Uyghurs. Xi Jinping said it's to reduce radicalism, to which Donald Trump apparently then said, well, that's a good idea. What's your view of that?
I think that is the most corrosive part of these allegations, and if it's true, it really shows a misunderstanding both of the facts around the Uyghurs and the political repression and the concentration camps that China is running with innocent people, millions of innocent people in concentration camps. But again, I think the insight for me is the priority that the US president puts on the US economy. And unfortunately, it's not that simple. And China's repression, not just of the Uyghurs, but of the Hong Kong people and of everybody that it gets control over, is one of the most disturbing things that we all have to face up to.